All right, stand by. 10 seconds.
Ready, camera,
Show.
one.
Talent.
Ready, camera, two.
And cue
2,
talent.
1.
Roll for record.
There's a refugee crisis in Europe, and it's headed our way. I'm John Phillips, and this is The Rundown. The world has been gripped by the horrifying images of dead children and desperate people climbing fences and struggling with police. Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy, and even the tiny Greek island of Lesbos are near the tipping point as thousands of desperate refugees fleeing rampaging Islamic terrorists and grinding poverty do everything they can to get to stable Western countries where they're fed, sheltered, and frequently paid with public welfare funds. Pope Francis has called on governments and Catholics personally to shelter the migrants. And the United States is reportedly answering the call, planning to increase the number of refugees we take to 75,000 or more next year. That is almost enough to fill the Rose Bowl. And that's on top of the roughly 1 million legal immigrants we allow in per year. The untold hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants we know are crossing the southern border or overstaying their visas, and the family members of immigrants we allow in through family reunification laws. Meanwhile, how many refugees are our Muslim allies in the region, including the very wealthy countries like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Oman, and the United Arab Emirates taking in? Zero, zip, nada, nothing, goose egg. Why? Because aside from the cost, these countries are terrified of foreign fighters slipping in among the refugees and destabilizing their own populations, as ISIS has promised to do. That's not an idle threat. Even if radicals are not among the refugees already, those populations are incredibly fertile ground for homegrown Islamic radicalism. Consider Boston Marathon bombers Dzhokhar and Tamerlan Tsarnaev, who were only small children when they were allowed in as refugees and yet grew up despising the country that took them in and supported their family with over $100,000 of American welfare dollars. Should the U.S. take in more refugees, or are we opening up ourselves to more Islamic terrorism? What's more important, offering humanitarian help to the desperate of the world or preserving the culture of Western civilization? And who's to blame for botching our foreign policy so abysmally that the world has to make this decision? Joining me to talk about all the controversy is author and political satirist Scott Ott in Dallas, Texas, and stand-up comic and PJTV contributor Stephen Cruiser here in Los Angeles. Scott, we'll start with you on this one. I have a few names to read you, and I'm going to butcher these names, but that's okay. They're all in jail or dead. Fazlidin Kurbanov, otherwise known as the Idaho Man. Mohammed Sharif. I don't think he has a nickname, but he was in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Tamerlan Tsarnaev and the rest of his family. The Blind Sheik, Ramzi Youssef, and Mohammed Hadayet. What do all these names have in common?
Is this one of those gotcha questions like Hugh Hewitt is always asking to Donald Trump? I suspect, Johnny, that in the context of this show, these folks all have in common the fact that they were refugees who came to the United States and then later committed horrendous acts.
That's right. The first one, otherwise known as Idaho Man, came from Uzbekistan. He was convicted of terrorism. The second one, Mohammed Sharif, came from Iraq. He was caught with IEDs in Bowling Green, Kentucky. The Boston Marathon bombers were familiar with their work. The Blind Sheik and Ramzi Youssef blew up the World Trade Center the first time in the 90s. And Mohammed Hadayet was the guy that shot up the LL counter at LAX. Is it wrong of me to look at these people that we let in as refugees and look at the crisis and say, you know what, I think our allies in the region should be the ones to take care of this. We've done enough.
I don't necessarily think it's wrong of you to think that way, but I think that there's another perspective that is maybe more humanitarian, if you want to look at it that way. Our first focus is to say, are there legitimate refugees whose lives are in danger, who can't stay in their home country, who must flee? If there are those legitimate refugees, and let's just set aside the infiltrating ISIS guys for a moment. If there are those legitimate refugees, what is best for them right now? Is it best to whisk them away from the place that they grew up and to take them to another country? And you could say, yes, that's the case if you think that in the short run, and maybe in the long run, nothing is ever going to get better in their hometown. It is always going to be a hell on earth, and there's nothing we can do about it. And then you have to acknowledge, this is kind of a World War II scale thing where you say, yeah, bring the ships, bring the planes, get these people out of here, do something to help these people. Now, if you don't think it's a permanent situation, you may do what these Gulf states, these Muslim-run Gulf states are doing, which is to say, we'll give you our money, but we're not opening our doors to you right now. We'll help you to fund refugee camps. We'll pay for that kind of stuff. And the United States has already paid something like $4 billion toward helping to house these people and feed them and provide medicine. And we have all these not-for-profit organizations and government agencies that are trying to do everything they can to help. But you do have to watch out for the guys who are sneaking in. But I don't think you can start with that, though. I don't think you start with saying, we're not going to do anything because terrorists might come here. I think you start with the needs of the legitimate refugees.
Scott talks about the needs of the refugees. What about the needs of the country where they're going? Because immigration is meant to benefit the country, not the immigrant. And if these people are going to come here and they're going to go on welfare, which statistically speaking, many of them will, and terrorists are going to slip through the cracks, which we've seen happen time and time and time again, and the assimilation process is going to be a tough one. They're coming from Syria, and we're going to drop them off in modern-day United States. Then why shouldn't we take a step back and say, you know what? We've done our part. We've taken in more than any other country on planet Earth. It's time for people in the area where, if the circumstances in those countries get better, they can theoretically go back home. It's time for those countries to step up to the plate.
Immigration is supposed to benefit the country? You and your 1950s views. No, it really is. This is one of the things that irks me so much about liberals, other countries, and I'm often dismissive of other countries because I'm an American, but people are always complaining about us being the world's police. We shouldn't be the world's police. Don't let America be the world's police. But then when something like this happens, they want us to be the world's shelter. They want us to be the world. They want us to open everything up. The world's flop house. They want us. So we're supposed to sit there and take everybody in. You know what? Let us be the world's police, and you don't have problems like this as often. That's the first thing, and I'm not being flippant about that. If we were allowed to actually go out and fight a war and deal with these Islamic savages, things would get a lot better all around the globe right now. But the fact that people don't really want us, and when they do want us, they want us to do these quarter measures to take care of it, is why this is a problem all over the world at the moment. So no, I don't think we're obligated to be the world's shelter now. If you don't want us to use our military might to counter this in the first place before it comes here and starts affecting us on our home soil, no, I don't think we're obligated at all. I don't feel and like Scott said, there's a way to look at the nuances of this, but at the moment, no, I would be a little more black and white about it and say, you know what, let us go out and fight these guys where they're a problem right now before you want us to become the big-hearted flop house.
Now, you're the only Roman Catholic on the panel.
Yes.
The Pope Francis, has come out and said that governments have a duty to shelter these migrants.
Because he's the Pope. What do you think? This is another thing drives me nuts about the liberal media. He's the Pope. What's he going to say? Screw him. He's the Pope. He's supposed to say that. God, people really need to get a grip about what the difference between a spiritual leader and a political leader, all right? He's not going to come out and say, let him die.
He's also the political leader of the Vatican. That's
he's the political leader of the Vatican. It's such a big military powerhouse.
You know what?
No, but
the Vatican has a big palace. Let him live there.
Yeah, my priest is going to tell me something different than my city councilman is going to tell me. So yes, the Pope says that. And my pastor talked about it in church this week. But the way my pastor framed it was, he said, wouldn't it be nice if we could? We can't. Wouldn't it be nice if we could? That's how my pastor talked about it the other day. And he loves this Pope. So yes, the Pope is going to say things like that because he's the Pope.
Get this man some wine. Scott Ott, what do you think the assimilation process is going to be like for these people, assuming we take in 75,000 like we say we will?
I haven't heard that we said we would do that. I've heard that we said we may do 5,000 or 8,000 next year. We've only taken in 3,000 this year, and that number may double by the end of the year. So I haven't heard numbers like that.
75,000 total.
It becomes difficult to assimilate large groups of people who come in clusters like that. They tend to, not only once they get out of their sort of refugee situation and find a place to live, they tend to cluster together in neighborhoods that can become ghettos. It depends on also what kind of resources they have, because when you are chasing, for example, in World War II, if we had opened our doors and said, we will take any Jewish person from that area of the world who wants to come here, you would get a broad cross-section socioeconomically of people. And if these are legitimate refugees, I suspect you'd see the same thing. I don't know that they're all, sort of bottom of the barrel economically.
Were Tamerlan Tsarnaev and his brother legitimate, and their family who went on welfare and collected $100,000?
No, I don't think we should do that. I frankly don't think we should. I think there should be a waiting period. However, John, and I'll call you on this again, every time we have an issue like this, you find the murderers and the terrorists, and you broad brush it.
Don't forget
and say,
the rapists.
Hey,
Thank
look,
you, Donald Trump.
And the rapists, and you say, hey, everybody, this is the risk, man. Well, if you look at the fail rate, the error rate among the millions of people who've come here, it's terrible when it happens. But overall, the United States has done a pretty good job of keeping ourselves safe in the midst of this flood of refugees and immigrants.
Here's the difference. When you take in Jews, like we should have done more of in the 1940s, from places like Germany, from France, from the Netherlands, from Poland, from countries where Hitler was indiscriminately killing them, they could assimilate to American society. They were educated. Many of them spoke English or learned English very quickly after moving here, and it worked out just fine. When you're taking people from Syria, okay, that are living essentially in societies that are cavemen societies, and you're putting them in modern America, you're asking for trouble. Scott,
are you telling me this?
Yes.
Okay. I think that it does bring problems with it. There's no doubt about that. But I would suggest that our Jewish viewers would paint a less rosy picture of how assimilation happened for them in the last century.
Here's what worries me about the present situation right now is that in terms of Islamic terrorism, is that Al-Qaeda used to be the long game people. They would get people in there early, 15 years ahead of time, sleeper cells, that kind of thing. ISIS has proven itself to be a lot more nimble and something a little more flexible. They're good with the social media. They can recruit people from afar. They're very adept. They're very dangerous, and they're a little more flexible and nimble and able to take advantage of a situation like this and start sneaking some people in a hurry. That's what worries me about this present situation, because they are so much more adept at moving quickly and shifting on the fly.
Would you want a lot of these people moving to your neighborhood?
No. My neighborhood is all Persian Jews who fled the Ayatollah Khomeini, and those are good people. I like those people. They're good people. If you ever want to hear a screw Iran story, come to my neighborhood and let's go to the kosher market, and you'll hear plenty of those. I like them very much.
All right, Scott, I want to pose the same question to you. Do you want them in your neighborhood?
Yes, absolutely. And I'll tell you why. I've had firsthand experience with this. When I was campaigning for office, going door to door in Allentown, Pennsylvania, there's quite a large Syrian community in the Allentown area in Lehigh County. And I got to meet a lot of those folks while I was going door to door. And they're some of the nicest people you ever want to meet. And this even sounds like I feel like a racist when I say they're some of the nicest people. They're humans, okay? They're like all humans, some good, some bad. But just because they come from Syria or just because they're Muslim doesn't mean you have to treat them with a broad brush. We are not broad brush people, John.
But you can look at statistics, and you can't say that
you're not a statistic, though.
Well, no, I agree. But I agree. Let me try to wedge middle ground. Let me try to wedge middle ground here.
Yeah.
I agree with Scott on that, but we don't have adult conversations about the bad side of this anymore at the political level, at the upper levels. Nobody wants to have a real adult conversation about the fact that the bad people do exist, and that's why things need to get treated with a broader brushstroke right now, because the people in charge aren't really in charge. There are no adults in charge right now dealing with this.
USA Today,
problem, frankly, is like 30% of these people who are trying to get into our country are talk show hosts, and they're taking your job, baby, when they get here.
All right, we'll let Scott have the last word. So what do you think? Should Western governments, including the United States, take in more refugees? Would you like them moving into your neighborhood? Or is the risk just too great? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'm John Phillips. Thanks so much for watching The Rundown.